Ants of the Fire, The Legend of Telo, a novel by Jack Lee. Parts 15 and 16. The Hatchery and the Decision. Part 15. The Hatchery. After her caretaker left, Telo stared at the wall and tried to wrap her mind around what she had learned. How could she be the nurse? She remembered her training. She remembered killing mites in the cricket. She remembered the story of her colony and what she had to do to free them from the roaches and the evil drone. How could her memory be so wrong? Telo started to get even more frightened. What if she was succumbing to this madness? What if all her memories were a mirage? The caretaker came back to Telo's chamber the next day. Telo had not gotten any rest.
All right, we're going to the hatchery today. All ants work in the hatchery first.
Telo was led through many more winding tunnels until they reached the egg chamber. There were many ants much smaller than herself and even an escort. They were scuffling here and there, moving around small cream-colored casings that contained new ants ready to be born. The eggs were organized by age. New eggs were placed at one end of the room and were moved closer to the entrance as they became ready to hatch. After a new antling emerged from an egg, the antling was taken to the nursery where she would be fed and cared for.
This is where we all begin. Our mother gives birth to us, and we are cared for here by our sisters. Everyone begins their work for the colony here. Let's get you started.
This new nurse showed Telo how to distinguish the age of an egg by the texture of its casing. New eggs had a harder outer casing to protect the ant growing inside. Older eggs had more supple casings, almost like a rotten grape, so that it would be easier for a new ant to break out of when it was ready to be born. Telo looked at the younger workers scurrying around the room. They gave her strange looks, like she didn't belong there. A few of them even approached the caretaker and whispered in her ear. The caretaker, or nurse, or caretaker, would give some rude retort and the ant would storm back to work. Telo tried to talk to one of the workers, but she was duly ignored. There was too much work to do after all. The ants worked together like a machine, with the same kind of precision that they had demonstrated when they were dismantling and hauling the frog. There was no confusion of any kind, only clarity. They only stopped working to eat, drink, and rest, which they did in shifts without being told. There was a small pile of food in the room that was always being replenished by other ants.
I think we can find an opening for you somewhere near the end, the caretaker/nurse said. These eggs are ready to move to the last pile. They're almost ready to hatch. Carry them with your pinchers. Be careful not to squeeze too hard. You'll harm the little antling.
Telo did as she was told. She picked up eggs one by one, doing her best not to crunch into them with her mandibles. This proved to be a more difficult task than Telo had expected. She was used to using her pinchers to hurt other creatures and carry food for herself. She never had to be careful with anything before. The first few eggs she lifted were not too difficult. She inspected them after placing them in the ready-to-hatch pile to make sure she didn't injure the eggs. The fourth egg she picked up provided Telo with a shock. It started to move. Telo felt the legs and pinchers and antennae of the ant inside the egg pressing against the case. This made Telo very uncomfortable. She didn't like the responsibility of caring for things. It was not in her nature. It was also very boring work. No running or biting or stinging involved. Telo's favorite things. After a few hours of moving eggs from here to there, the caretaker returned.
Is this helping with your memory at all?
No, I've never done anything like this before. The caretaker's face turned grave and she looked as if a combination of disappointment and dread was about to scar her face.
Maybe it has been too long. We'll try you out somewhere else later. Maybe you'll remember then. Let's go back to your cell and get you some food. No need to work yourself too hard. You're just getting used to being reacclimated.
The caretaker led Telo back to her cell and gave her some food and water.
Okay, let's get back to your reorientation, but first a review. Where do all ants begin?
The egg chamber.
Where do they go after that?
The birthing chamber.
Good, soldier. I think you're starting to remember slowly. You just don't know it yet.
I still don't know what I'm supposed to remember exactly.
We'll work on that. Do you remember what happens after an ant is born?
Well, my nurse cared for me until I was ready to go outside. Then she taught me how to hunt.
Soldier, I don't want you to mention the nurse again. You are the nurse.
How am I the nurse? I had a nurse. She taught me how to hunt and fight.
That is not how an ant's life works. You were born, you were cared for in the hatchery until you could work. You were assigned to the egg chamber where you cared for the queen's eggs. Then you returned to the hatchery to care for your newborn sisters. After that, you received your calling, and you were promoted to be a permanent place in the colony. That's what happened.
My calling?
Yes. The time that an ant spends caring for the antlings is an important time in an ant's development. That is when your desires start to emerge. That is when you learn what your permanent position in society is.
How do we read these desires exactly?
Oh, well, you have dreams, or you take to certain roles like attending to the queen. Some ants desire to feed us and become hunters and gatherers. Some ants desire to protect us and become soldiers. Some ants like to transport food. Some ants like to rid our colony of waste and keep our nest clean. They haul our excrement out, our dead, to the outside so that we don't die of disease and illness and so on and so forth.
What do you dream of?
Well, I dreamt of attending to the queen. I had just started dreaming of being an attendant when the queen chose me to escape with her egg. The other 5 were on their way to embracing their new roles as well.
Telo turned her head away, a hint of embarrassment and shame in her voice as she spoke. I dream of death. All I think about is how much I want to fight and to kill things.
Well, your desire is to be a soldier. I see you moving and fighting in your sleep. That is why you're called soldier.
But I've always had this desire, and my nurse... The caretaker was starting to feel frustrated. She was clearly angry that she was having to repeat herself over and over again to this soldier ant, and she was scared that the ant was too far along in her madness. She didn't mind having Telo destroyed if that is what needed to be done, but she didn't like killing her own kind either, especially when it was obvious that this was her sister.
Soldier, let me tell you again how ant society works. You are born, you work in the egg chamber and the hatchery, you develop your desire, and you are promoted to that position permanently. You had to have been a nurse first, and judging by your size, you have to be older than what you are describing.
Then why do I remember my nurse and I hunting and gathering? Why do I remember her training me? Why did she tell me to go free our queen and our sisters from the roaches?
You have madness, soldier. You were one of the 6 that our queen sent to ensure our survival. You were separated from us and you were alone for too long. Maybe something happened to the egg you were carrying, and the trauma of not fulfilling your purpose has damaged your mind. Queens give potential queens their names. We all knew that the egg you carried was going to be called Telo when it hatched. Obviously, something happened to the egg, and the trauma of failing the queen and being alone for so long has confused you.
I never met our mother. I was never given an egg. I was supposed to be a queen. That is why I was given a name. I hatched, and my nurse tried to make me a queen and called me by my name, and then she realized I was a soldier, and she trained me to be one so that we could go and free our mother.
Soldier,
my name is Telo. I have a name. I'm not going to forget it.
I see.
The caretaker hung her head and looked at Telo with sympathetic eyes. She felt sorry for the soldier ant. Whatever had happened to her and the potential queen she carried must have been a terrible ordeal. She reached her antennae down and touched them to Telo's. Telo seemed scared and angry.
I'm so sorry for whatever happened to you, soldier.
The caretaker turned and left Telo's chamber. Telo was tired from hauling eggs all day and was restless from a lack of battle. She needed to fight something. She ran over all the events in her life, again and again and again. Her caretaker was wrong. She was so sure. After a while, the events in her mind became moving pictures, and she was dreaming once again. Part 16. The Decision. Telo was awakened from her rest by a group of ants.
"You have been summoned by the Queen,"
one of them said. Telo found it odd that such a large group had been sent to take her to the Queen. Where was her usual escort? She was led into the throne room to face the Queen. The throne room was surrounded by ants that were not much larger than her own nurse. They were all smaller than Telo. They looked like they were ready for a fight. The last time Telo had been led into a room, there was an air of caution. Now there was an air of inevitable conflict. "Soldier, your attendant tells me you are not making sufficient progress in your reorientation. You are my sister, and I wanted to talk to you myself before we make a decision about what to do with you," Sama said. "I don't know what you mean by sufficient progress. She keeps trying to tell me things that I know aren't true. I was an egg, hatched by my nurse in our home. My nurse wanted me to be a queen, but I wasn't. She taught me how to be a soldier, and we were going to free our mother together, but she was killed before we could leave." "Free our mother from whom?" "From the roaches, from the rebellious drone." There was a stirring throughout the crowd, a stirring of anger and confusion. "What is she talking about? What are roaches? Elves can't rebel." "Quiet!" the Queen called. The room fell silent again. "Soldier, you only know those things because you were the nurse put in charge of one of the 6 eggs. You were alone for too long, and you have lost your mind. Even if I am crazy, we still have to go free that queen. I am the queen, soldier, and we won't be going to free anyone." Telo was flabbergasted. She felt the most revolting emotion that she had ever felt growing in her abdomen. She understood what the word abomination felt like. But that is our purpose. That is why we are out here, away from home. We are out here because that is the nature of things. Queens give birth to new queens. The new queens mate with the chosen male and start a new colony. The queen's colony will reside in that place with the drone and the roaches until they die. But we'll still be here. We've survived. That is the way of nature. It is not our purpose to be saving other queens and fighting wars with strange creatures and beasties. We were sent out here so that we would come back and save our mother. No. We were sent out here to survive. There were 6 eggs, 4 potential queens, and 2 drones to impregnate them. Myself and the 2 drones ended up here. Your egg, the one to be called Telo, obviously didn't survive. We don't know where the other 2 are, but we're here, safe. And we are not going to risk our safety and survival to go save our mother, who is, more than likely, already dead. Telo looked at the 3 nurses by the queen's side. Surely you don't believe this. You carried those eggs out here so that we could save our queen. Telo's escort stepped forward. Our queen does not need saving. She is right here. The 3 nurses stood with a sense of pride for a job well done. They had stuck together, cared for their eggs, and ensured the survival of their family's lineage. They stood by Queen Sama like they were war heroes. War heroes that did not have to engage in any combat. Telo had had enough. I am leaving, she said. No, soldier, you're not, Sama said. I'm sorry that it has come to this. The queen gave a nod of her head, and the ants surrounding the room rushed towards Telo. She felt the wall of bodies closing in on her. She was larger than any one of them, but there were a lot more of them than her. Her desires began to take over her body. She started to shake with anticipation and excitement at the prospect of a fight. She felt a barrier come over her mind that clouded the rational part of her brain that felt fear and confusion. She felt her instincts take over. She reached out with her pinchers and grabbed her first assailant's head, crunching its shell and squeezing the contents of its head onto the ground. Telo's pinchers held nothing more now than a messy mass of antennae, eyes, and mouth parts. She swung her stinger behind her and caught another ant in the abdomen. She reached up with her powerful legs and slammed another into the dirt. She threw her body around in a wide circle and cut through the various ants. And within a short time, Telo had a small pile of bodies all around her. Her aggressors became afraid. "I am leaving now," Telo said. "I am going to save our queen." "You will meet your end," Sama said. The three nurses gathered around her and stared down at Telo. She wondered how they had come to this place. What events had transpired that would cause them to abandon their own mother, their own true queen? She looked at the nurse that had been her caretaker and guide since she arrived. "Are you going to stay here, or are you going to help me find home?" The nurse looked at the other two. They appeared to be having some kind of silent conversation that the world was not allowed to hear. "I am home." "And our mother? You're content to forget her?" "My life's purpose is to serve a queen in whatever manner she deems fit for our colony. I will do that just fine here." "We are all fine here," another said. Telo shook her head in anger, disappointed at what members of her family she had met so far. She thought about rushing them in the queen, stabbing them and crunching into their shells like she had just done the soldiers whose dead bodies now twitched around her. But these soldiers were not her sisters. These three nurses and queen were. She backed her way to the opening of the chamber and eased down the hallway until she could no longer see the throne room. Then she turned around and made her way through the systems of tunnels and passageways until she reached the surface. None of the other ants in the colony paid her any attention. They were just too busy performing their tasks and serving their purposes. Thank you for listening to parts 15 and 16 of Jack Lee's novel, Ants of the Fire, The Legend of Telo, titled The Hatchery and the Decision. The novelist Jack Lee is from the American South. He enjoys clean water, fresh air, and tall trees. He writes when time and sanity allow. All noises and musical tracks in the background of the story are from freesound.org. The sounds and musical tracks are being used under CC 0 Universal Public Domain Dedication licenses. This final song that you're hearing right now falls under the same umbrella, but it is pretty amazing though. So scoot over to freesound.org and check out Greek 555's Soundshow. She got some pretty sick music up. That does it this week for Prose. Stay right there on the edge of your seat, trying to think what might come next for Telo, all while trying to be something more than just a drone that falls in line. Jack Lee is calling us all out in the form of a young adult novel, eh? Well, until next time, as I do like to tell you each episode, love those around you, tell them that you do, and embrace this life as it is, always stranger than fiction.